As an international student, you already know that it's not easy securing a job in the US because of your student visa restrictions. But what if there was a way for you to know exactly where to look for US employers that love to hire US international students? Well, that's right. In this video, you're about to discover the top 5 US industries that are the most friendly towards US international students based on recent data published by the US government. Now, as an international student armed with this information, you will easily navigate your way through the challenging US job market hurdles that many US international students face. Now, this is the type of information that I wish I had early on as an international student, and I highly encourage you to stick around until the end of this video as you're going to receive a free career counseling from yours truly. You're welcome. Now, the ranking of these industries was performed using the most recent data published by the US Department of Homeland Security. Now, this data that I thoroughly analyzed consists of a combined list of the top 400 US employers that hire US international students that have been authorized to work on curricular practical training or CPT, optional practical training or OPT, and STEM optional practical training. But hey, I'm not going to bore you with the details of how these industries were ranked. If you'd like to learn more, you can find resources to our website linked in the description section below. Now, I've got to say that when I was ranking these industries, I was very surprised at the industries that ranked at the top, and I'm quite sure that you're also going to be surprised as well. So in the comment section, go ahead and let us know what industry you think is going to rank at the top. Now, without further talking, let's get into it. Now, taking the 5th place was the tech industry. And I found that the tech industry accounted for just about 10% of the industries surveyed in this study. Now, the top companies in the tech industry that hired the most number of international students for OPT and STEM OPT positions were Cisco Systems, Cerner Corporation, and Oracle, while the top companies that hired the most number of international students for CPT positions were Samsung Research, Adobe Systems, Cisco Systems, and Dell. Now, in the tech industry, the US employers that hired the most number of international students come from a variety of software-based companies like Salesforce and Adobe Systems to hardware-based companies like HP, Dell, and Nvidia. Also, when looking closely at the data, there was a very clear trend that these industries tend to prioritize the hiring of international students that had backgrounds in a STEM-related field. Now, you might already have expected this, as the tech industry is known to hire people that have backgrounds in computer science or in a related field. Another trend that was seen in the data is that a lot of these tech companies tend to hire as aggressively for CPT positions as they hire aggressively for OPT and STEM OPT positions. So in other words, if you're an international student who's looking to get your foot in the door with a tech company, it's a great idea to try to secure an internship position using CPT, as that's going to open more doors for you to get a full-time position in OPT or STEM OPT. Now, in this video, I'm not going to go into details of how much these industries pay. That's going to be a subject of discussion in the preceding video, where I'm going to be talking about the best industries for international students in the US. In that video, we're going to be ranking these top 5 industries according to several factors, such as how much you can make working in the industry, your career mobility within the industry, and also discussing your chances of securing a long-term working visa, such as the H-1B visa within the industry. So if you would like to catch that video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Now, I'm going to be including a free PDF guide containing more helpful information to the US employers that were surveyed in this study. So if you would like to get this free PDF guide, check out the link in the description section below. Now, taking the 4th place was the financial services industry. Now, this industry accounted for just about 13% of the US employers that were surveyed in this study. Now, the big dogs that hired the most number of international students in the financial services industry for OPT and STEM OPT positions were the big 4 accounting firms like Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Ernst & Young. Some other heavy hitters in this list that recruited a lot of international students were investment banks like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. And similarly, these same companies in the financial services industry were found to hire the most number of international students for CPT positions. So these trends in the data might suggest that these companies in the financial services industry have a high retention of international students who work with them during CPT internships. Now, a very interesting trend when looking at the data of the financial services industry was that these companies actually hire a much larger number of international students on STEM OPT than they hire international students on OPT. Now, this could be surprising, as one would expect that an investment bank or an accounting firm should hire students in a non-STEM related field such as finance and accounting. But in the modern age of banking and finance that's over-reliant on big data, you can see why these companies have a high demand for international students with a background in a STEM related field than students coming from non-STEM backgrounds. Now on to number 3 was the higher education and non-profit research organizations. Now, these industries accounted for about 20% of the US employers that were surveyed in this study. Now, a lot of the institutions in this industry were large public and private research universities, and the institutions that hired the most number of international students on OPT and STEM OPT were institutions like MIT, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins University. Now, on the other hand, the institutes that hired the most number of international students on CPT were mostly non-profit research organizations, some of which were the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, the Los Alamos National Lab, and the Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education. Now, a very interesting trend that I saw in the data was that about 50% of the US universities tend to hire more students on OPT than students on STEM OPT. So this would mean that if you don't have a STEM degree, let's say for example you have a degree in education or a degree in the arts, then you might want to look into pursuing a career in the higher education and the nonprofit organization industry. Now, coming in at number 2 was the consulting/IT staffing industry. Now, this industry accounted for about 23% of the US employers that were surveyed in this study. Now, the US employers in this industry that hired the most number of international students on OPT and STEM OPT were Veridic Solutions, Randstad, and Robert Half. And when it came to CPT, the companies that hired the most number of international students in this industry were Randstad, Populous Group, and Cognizant. Now, I should mention here that a lot of these US employers in this industry tend to come from large staffing companies where what they do is when they hire you on as an international student, they then send you out to work for other clients as a temporary contractor. Now, many US employers in this industry tend to provide a variety of services, some of which were staffing services for the IT, accounting, and finance roles. Now, within this industry, you would also find several smaller companies providing IT-related and staffing solutions. Now, something also interesting that I found in the data was that within this industry, you had several companies that had been allegedly involved with OPT fraud. And so when analyzing the data, I had to exclude these companies from the study. Now, when I speak of the OPT fraud, I think as an international student who might be interested in working in this industry, this is something you have to know. You see, a lot of companies in this industry were involved in some type of shady practice where they charge international students some money in order for them to provide them with an OPT employment just so you could remain in the States as an international student. And the consequence of this is that if the US Department of Homeland Security finds out that you were employed with a company that was involved in OPT fraud, your OPT status will be canceled and you will fall out of status and have to leave the United States. So I think that is something you should keep in mind if you want to work in this industry. You should make sure that your potential company in this industry has not been involved in any type of OPT fraud. And finally, taking the number 1 spot is big tech. Now, this very small list of only 7 companies accounted for about 24% of all the international students that were hired in this study. And these 7 companies hiring international students on CPT, OPT, and STEM OPT were none other than Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Intel, Facebook, Apple, and IBM. Now, although these companies are categorized as tech companies, it's not fair to lump them in the same bucket as the other tech companies that were mentioned earlier. So now you can see why these companies could not have been compared to the other tech companies and had to be put in a different league of their own. Now, the data also showed that these 7 companies aggressively hire a lot of international students with a STEM degree, as about 86% of the international students working in these companies after graduation were working using a STEM OPT. Now here's where things got very interesting, is that when you looked for the top industries that hired international students on post-completion OPT and STEM OPT alone, the number one spot went to the higher education and the nonprofit organizations. Number two spot went to the consulting and IT staffing companies, and number three went to the big tech. And on the flip side, when you looked at the top industries for CPT alone, the number one spot went to big tech, number two went to consulting and IT staffing companies, and number three went to the financial services industry. So there you have the data. These are the top industries that are the most favorable towards hiring international students in the US. Now, the conclusion that I want you to take from this video is not to spend all your time and energy only applying for job positions within these mentioned industries, as there are tons of other international students out there who've gone to have rewarding careers working in industries that are not mentioned in this video. Instead, what I want you to do is to use the information in this video and let this serve as a guide to let you know what industries that you have the highest chance of getting an employment position as an international student. Thank you for watching this video, and as always, be unbounded.